Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, 2021 GLS applicants on how Kognito can meet grant requirements. We're happy to be able to share today's presentation with you all as you prepare your upcoming grant applications. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items to run through. Today's presentation will be recorded, and a copy along with the slides will be sent out to all registrants. Attendees are in listen-only mode. However, if you'd like to chat with us or ask a question, you can do so on the right-hand side of your screen in the GoToWebinar control panel. Finally, we invite you to connect with us on social media by tweeting @Kognito or using the hashtag KognitoWebinars. Now, during today's presentation, we'll be briefly discussing the goals of the GLS Campus Suicide Prevention Grant Program, giving you an overview of Kognito's online prevention simulations, outlining how we support the required grant activities, as well as the added benefits of using Kognito to meet those requirements, concluding with a brief demo of Kognito's at-risk mental health students before moving into a Q&A. I'd now like to introduce today's presenters. Daniel Statter is a business development leader with 7+ years of experience building partnerships to improve learning and operational outcomes for college and university partners. Before joining Kognito, Dan was the first business hire for a successful ed tech startup and worked on campus in roles in residence life, campus union, and academic affairs. Dan earned his Master of Science degree in Higher Education Administration from the University of Wisconsin and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Marquette University. We are also joined by Darren Jones, who serves as Manager of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships at Kognito. Prior to Kognito, Dr. Jones served as the Associate Vice President of Student Engagement at Mary Baldwin University. He held roles within student affairs at several universities across various functional areas, including orientation, learning communities, retention programs, student life and activities, fraternity and sorority affairs, intervention services, residence life, housing, academic advising, leadership development programs, community standards, and Title IX. I'd like to now turn it over to Dan for today's presentation.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you to everyone. Welcome on behalf of myself and my colleague, Dr. Darren Jones. Again, thank you for everyone who's here and everyone who will be listening into this recording afterwards. As Scott said, we're just going to jump right in and start with information about the GLS grant, and then follow that up with how Kognito can support the grant requirements and your overall goals. So as you see on the screen, and I'll just highlight some of what the GLS Campus Suicide Prevention Grant Program is all about. So the purpose is to fund the development of a comprehensive, collaborative, well-coordinated, and evidence-based approach to enhancing mental health services and promoting health behaviors and preventing harmful behaviors. And this, the GLS grant was actually passed by Congress and signed into law by President Bush back in 2004. And I know all of you are here for a U.S. history lesson this morning, but I wanted to bring that up in seriousness because you'll see that SAMHSA this year has increased some of the amount of awards and the number of awards, and we think that will certainly help us all work through the challenges that our communities are facing today. So as I said, this current cycle, you'll notice some increases from the previous cycle. There will be 24 awardees this cycle. That's up from 18 last cycle, on about $2.4 million awarded through the grant program, and up from about 1.8 last cycle. And your funding is available for up to 3 years. And a portion of funding, and this is what we'll spend some more time on as we go forward, a portion of that funding can be used for Kognito so that your students, faculty, and staff, your target populations, again, we can meet the requirements of the program, which we'll dive into more detail. But before we get to the program, thank you, Scott, a little bit about Kognito. Big picture, we focus on the toughest, most meaningful conversations, right? And when you have a meaningful conversation, you remember it and you feel it. And at Kognito, again, we help people practice having the toughest conversations in a safe environment. so that they can practice and in order to be more effective in those moments where they're speaking with someone in distress or identifying within themselves some things that are new. On the next slide, we again highlight some of the specific topical areas. So of course, mental health and well-being and alcohol and other substance use prevention will be the focus today. But when we think about challenging conversations, as I mentioned at Kognito, we do cover other topic areas as well, specifically sexual misconduct prevention and topics concerning our military community members as well. Now, consistent across all of those topic areas, again, with the core being in mental health and well-being, is that we utilize evidence-based experiential simulations that, again, allow your targeted populations to practice those difficult conversations. And then finally, importantly, allows you to show some measurable impact of those trainings that you've provided. So why Kognito? We have some of the top 5 things that we hear when we ask clients this question, or really what it boils down to is that Kognito is effective. Right? And so what I mean by that is, first, I already mentioned, we rely on evidence-based practices. So from the very beginning of the development of Kognito, working alongside subject matter experts, folks like yourself on this call, to ensure that the content is placed in the right context. Also, you'll see on this document, and when we think about effectiveness, the utilization of surveys so that you can receive direct feedback from your users. These are valid, and again, these are measures that you can utilize for your grant program, but also more broadly in your work across campus. And finally, this is all within the context of cutting-edge animation technology. So I want to move on to the next slide in just a moment, but really, again, one piece that you can take forward as well, Kognito is the only company with health simulations listed on the Department of Health and Human Services and SAMHSA's National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs. So credential, again, sort of speaking to some of the values that our clients that you saw on that previous slide. Everyone attending or viewing this webinar will receive all of the slides, including the links you see here. So these are peer-reviewed articles supporting the effectiveness that I'm just talking about, and they're all linked here for your reference. Now I want to switch gears though and get back into the GLS requirements, and we'll kind of go point by point here for the next few slides. But again, just to summarize how Kognito supports the GLS grant requirement. Now, the very first requirement speaks to training staff, students, and faculty to respond effectively. And so through the simulation, right, this is where those target populations will get that practice with real-world examples where they can digest, reflect, and then put those learnings into that university context, whether they are an RA, or a custodian, or a faculty member, wherever they sit within our community. And we find that that's what really separates Kognito out, right, is that by practicing the material, it becomes less of an abstract theory and more of a skill that you're building. And that's really the focus of our product. The second requirement that you see on the screen is providing outreach services. So while we put a lot of time, and I've already spent a fair amount of the webinar talking about the simulation, importantly, we need to help you drive people to complete it. So that's part of our task as well, is to providing outreach services to help make sure that your populations are aware of the simulation and can easily access it on their own time. Now, we also, in sort of a continuation of the previous point, help with disseminating materials so that you can increase awareness of your, of the strategies within your grant project. This may be very specific. These may be examples from other campuses, and really working with you to understand what would be most effective within your campus environment. And then finally, you see, and we'll touch on this a little bit more, the mention of the pre, post, and follow-up survey that all of your users will have an opportunity to complete. You have access to all of the information from the pre, post, and follow-up survey. And as we see, those surveys measure self-efficacy, or the confidence that your users have to then engage in those difficult conversations, and how confident they are to be able to refer someone if that's appropriate, or the confidence to see in themselves that there may be, something that they need help working through. And then just to close out some of the specific requirements, again, all of these will be included in your follow-up materials. We also have a lot of, we can provide a lot of assistance in working with the groups already on campus that have been identified as key stakeholders in your grant, whether that is including those groups in the formulation from the very get-go of rollout, or again, as key partners in dissemination and getting the word out to your target populations. Finally, your programs will have a combination of local resources as well as national resources, so that your students, your faculty, and your staff will have the number to be able to refer someone to the counseling center if that's appropriate. They will have access to the continuing training that you may provide them if that's appropriate. Again, these are all conversations we will have with your team and ensure that your environment provides all of that material, both national and campus-based. And I think, Scott, we can move ahead to usage reports. I want to spend just, thank you so much. Now, a key requirement, of course, with the GLS grant, as I mentioned at the beginning, is showing and measuring your impact or your effectiveness. We provide that quarterly reporting requirement for you. I want to just give you a second to take a look at what that looks like. So, you have 24/7 access to your dashboard. Again, that is where you can generate that quarterly usage report, which is a requirement of your SAMHSA grant. There, in addition to that report, you would have an opportunity to customize demographic questions. So we can go beyond the scope of the requirements of the grant, again, if there are particular demographics or questions that you want to focus on. Now, your dedicated client success manager is going to be your point person with these conversations. And so, as I mentioned, your survey may be a bit unique. You may customize some of those questions. But in general, we do have standardized questions that, again, speak to self-efficacy, that speak to the confidence that your users, both before, after, and then 2 months after, what's that confidence level look like? So you see on the screen, as we have through longitudinal peer-reviewed research, been able to show that when users take Kognito simulations, both immediately after the simulation, but also carrying months into the future, that they do feel more confident about recognizing when someone is showing signs of distress, and being more confident about knowing how to tackle that conversation, whether that's a referral, whether that's just being a really good listener, and all of the different options on that spectrum. One final point as we move to the next slide as well, it's really neat to hear about institutions that then use this Kognito survey data in their own manuscripts. Even just this morning, we received an outreach from a graduate student who asked about using this data in their dissertation. So just a quick side note, but it really speaks to the value of the information you'll receive. And that's something that, again, is consistent through all of the simulations with Kognito. In conclusion, we're getting towards the tail end of our webinar today, and I want to make clear, if you do have questions, please, as Scott said, feel free to put those into our chat box. Darren and I would love to try and address them while we're on the call today. But your client, Success Manager, as I mentioned, is your point person to help make sure that your implementation is customized for your goals and your needs. In addition to disseminating and marketing information, we wanted to share a few other services that are included when you sign on with Kognito. When we talk about marketing materials, those may be flyers. Those could also be PowerPoint presentations or materials, again, to help you talk about the research that you collected with other campus colleagues. It may also be, of course, to help troubleshoot any questions that come up along the way. So in summation, we really just want you to get a key takeaway that with Kognito, it's not just the simulation, but a whole lot of extra support and service as well. Thank you, Scott. And I want to, as we close out, just share one or two bullet points about the implementation process now that you've heard a bit about the services as well as the content, and then close by showing you the demo of at-risk for students. With Kognito, your users can start and stop and re-pick up a simulation at their own pace. You should also know that our simulations meet accessibility standards so that, again, your community can access the content when they need to and in the form that works for them. Finally, we often see Kognito as part of a larger either FYE or first year orientation or rising sophomore experience within the curricular context, oftentimes within a psychology or introductory course. These are all conversations, again, we will prompt and you will have with your Kognito Client Success Manager, again, to ensure that this is placed within the modality of all of the other learning that's happening on campus. Okay, so we just going to take a minute to go first into at-risk mental health for students, and then following, we will look at the alcohol and other drug for student simulation. The learning outcomes for the simulation are listed on the left-hand side of the screen, but students can expect about a 40-minute interactive practice simulation. Of course, as I said, students can start and stop, and it is based on their tailored responses. So it may take them a little bit longer, a little bit less time. But within that simulation, again, really focused on how users recognizing and identifying signs of distress in a peer. New to the simulation this year is also recognizing and understanding those signs in themselves. You see the last learning goal speaking to their actual creation of an action plan with set goals. But also finally, understanding the resources on campus. So if a referral is necessary, that they feel more confident about making that referral. And then for alcohol and other drugs, there are some consistent learning objectives as well. Again, understanding, one of the consistencies is understanding social norms. And that, again, really addresses one of the requirements of SAMHSA is addressing that stigma. And that it's okay, especially now, to be feeling the way that folks are feeling. But also with alcohol and other drugs, there's a key component of refusal strategies. So understanding that students will be entering either substance use or prevention at different stages, and making sure that there's a tailored approach for a student who doesn't plan on using alcohol and doesn't really see that as part of their future, or a student that may already be engaging with that content. And again, meeting those students where they are. But then finally, again, consistent is not only being able to feel more comfortable in seeing signs in my peers, but also recognizing signs in myself. And when I do recognize signs, building an action plan, setting goals, and to be able to help identify what those changes are. So again, that's just a quick summary of learning outcomes and sort of the didactic for AOD and at-risk for mental health for students. and then thank you. And then to close out, our Veterans on Campus, which is a combination of a faculty and staff module, as well as Together Strong, which is the peer-to-peer program focused for students. As you can see, understanding and breaking down stigma and norms is, again, going to be one of the learning outcomes in this simulation. Recognizing, again, signs in peers and understanding and building confidence to approach that conversation. And then being familiar with national but also campus resources when there's either a referral or appropriate conversation to bring in another professional from campus. And we can provide additional information in terms of some of these simulations have had specific research, so peer-reviewed articles that focus specifically on particular simulations. We can provide you all sorts of very, again, specific information if you have questions gone unanswered today. But just with our time, I want to make sure that we take a look at one of our practice simulations today before Darren and I address any questions that you all may have. Thanks, Scott. We'll see if we can get this running.
What are you up to?
Yeah, I haven't really been hanging out with anyone, just a lot going on.
Yeah?
Oh yeah, I've got a ton of assignments due, tests to study for, so much.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And everything's piling up. Plus, work has been super busy and my sister has been really sick, so I have to pull extra uncle duty, and I've kind of had some drama with people lately, which isn't helping at all.
So you can see already that beyond the visual cues and the responses that the student is giving, we'd have a myriad of different follow-up questions that we might choose from. And that's where the user can use that talk icon that we see on the screen. They'll be presented with different conversation pathways that they can choose from. Again, all of these options have been developed from subject matter experts and help to really point the student in the direction of some options that may be less effective, but also give them options for why this option will be effective. And then we'll see in a moment as well, after selection is made, that the student will see a virtual coach to help reinforce why a selection maybe was effective or ineffective. Importantly, this is practice, right? So the user can go back and try different pathways and, again, learn why something was effective and got them the response they were expecting, or maybe the inverse, and to try something different.
Wow, you really got yourself into a bad situation.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so maybe we're a little bit too judgmental, so that's our virtual coach just reminding us that we may not have intended to be judgmental, but that's maybe how it sounded. And to maybe choose an option that is a little bit more open-ended, or to consider that in your other options moving forward. So as you see, we can undo, and then we'll go back, and maybe we'll try validating, or again, try relating.
Sometimes I get tired of dealing with the drama too.
You do?
Yeah, like right now, a bunch of people in my class are all pissy because I guess I'm the only one who aced our last exam. So like, what? They're mad at me for doing well?
And if we need it, our virtual coach there is at the bottom of the screen, again, providing advice. And so, again, reinforcing that we also heard from Travis, that they felt heard, and that feeling of frustration isn't, Travis alone is not feeling that. We feel that too. Now, we would be able to go back and choose a different response. You can see the undo button is available, or we can progress through the conversation and try to learn more about what's making Travis frustrated.
I don't think I've seen you in class since Professor Brown wanted to meet with you. How'd that go?
Oh, fine. She was all, don't text during class. Why aren't your assignments in on time? What's up with your attitude lately? Whatever.
Nothing about that group work day?
Well, yeah, that came up.
I was on the other side of the room. I just heard the end of it. What happened?
Nothing happened. No one in the group was stepping up to do the work, and I just had this feeling it was all going to land on me again. Then Olivia shot me this attitude, and some words were said.
Some chairs were kicked?
Just one chair. Look, I'm done playing nice with those slackers.
Wow. All right. So I think we'll want to, for time's sake, just hit the pause there. But as you can see from this simulation, just a snapshot of that not didactic, but the opportunity for that user to choose different conversation pathways for that virtual coach, then based on that tailored customization, based on the response, can help prompt the user to either continue on with that effective line of inquiry, right? To let them know that validation is exactly what the person needed. Or maybe as we saw, or maybe that comment was too judgmental or could come off that way, and to think about that. You'll see also in the faculty and staff module that right now, these are two students sitting in what could be a dormitory. But for faculty and staff, they'll be talking with students within their office or within the residence hall, and really contextualize for your target population's experience and their context. Okay, that's all for me, Scott. Thanks. So just in conclusion, before the question and answer, you will be receiving, in addition to the recording of this webinar, our applicant resource packet. This will go over all of the requirements that we covered today, as well as information about Kognito. So will be a great resource for you moving forward. I know the grant application is due here already next week, so I'm sure most everyone has, gotten is probably almost done. So if there are any though questions today, we'd love to try to address them in our closing few minutes.
Great, Great, thanks guys. And we do have one question here coming in so far, and it's in relation to the customization. So either one of you can take this, but how can we customize the content of the simulation for our own needs?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we think it's very important for institutions to customize their internal and external resources, because institutions are located across the nation. You have the ability within the simulation to note what are those internal resources that you want to gear students towards, or educate your student population or your faculty and staff about that's on the campus. Also, you have external resources, so those that are outside of the institution. That could be national resources for these important topics, or it could be regional, so those that are in a community or in your county or city. And so those are important ways that we encourage folks to customize, but also there's the assessment piece. So some institutions take the option of customizing some of the questions in their survey, depending upon if they want to link it to any strategic plan. A lot of these topics are worded into strategic plans or missions, goals, objectives of your division. And so there may be some items that you want to assess that link to those, and we will more than happy to work with you to figure out which of those will be best, and provide you support on that end. So we're talking about assessment, but also those customization of internal, external resources.
Great, thank you. And to follow up with that, there's a question here about the assessment aspect of Kognito simulations, and the question is, at what marks are assessments made during the simulation process? At what points in time? And is the standard survey consistent with the GLS reporting guidelines?
Yes, very great question. So, one thing I will note before I answer is that we actually service close to 50% or maybe a little bit over 50% of GLS awardees. So, we are very familiar with their reporting requirements. And just to let you know, we got you. We got you. We make sure that you know, adhere to those requirements so that you can maintain your funding. So, but as far as the assessment timelines, there's a pre-survey once the user, the student, faculty, or staff member go into the simulation. Then there's a post-survey, so that's right after they complete the simulation. And then there's a 2-month follow-up to measure resilience, self-efficacy, confidence levels, so on and so forth. So there's a number of different things that is assessed that you can definitely use for the SAMHSA grant. And because you know we're familiar with the GLS and we have a lot of clients, we make sure that our standard instruments apply and meet those requirements. So one thing you don't have to worry about is making sure that your data is going to correlate to your reporting requirements.
Great, thank you. And with that, we are at time. There aren't any more questions, so I'd like to be respectful of everyone on the line's time and just move to close. I want to thank you both for your time sharing this information with us, and wish everyone on the line the best of luck filling out their grant applications over the next week.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.